The arguments on both sides so far have been mostly utilitarian. Torture works, torture doesn't work, torture has side effects, but there hasn't been much said about the moral high ground and America showing leadership in an ethical and moral universe. The do unto others as you would have them do unto you. What about the moral issue in here, which I think is a problem that many of us have?
Can I just say very briefly, let the record show that nobody's arguing on our side in favor of torture. The shame, frankly, the fault lies with the critics that damn everything with a T word and paint with a broad brush. We're not talking about torture. We're talking about the level of coerciveness and unpleasantness that permeates other spheres of public life without drawing any opposition from anybody. You tell me why, in order for us to occupy the moral high ground, we should eschew, give up, whatever verb you want to use, the level of coercion that is routinely used in other areas, including training of our own troops, specialized in advanced training, federal and state penitentiaries, boot camps for juvenile offenders. That makes no sense for us as a society to, instead of having a common baseline, but is not torture, to have privilege, uniquely privileged, only one set of people captured Al-Qaeda and Taliban terrorists. If that is morality, it's silly.
That's David Rivkin. Darius Rejali, do you want to try this one on?
Sure, I'll take that on. Look, you keep on saying that we do these things domestically and we should do them internationally, and what's the problem? Well, a couple of problems. First of all, let me just say a couple of things. If a young professor comes to me and he says, "Could you tell me exactly what sexual harassment is? I mean, if I do a little bit of it, is it okay?" You'd think that's creepy, right? These people are talking about, let's do a little bit of it, and it's creepy, and it should creep you out, okay? Because there are certain things you shouldn't get anywhere near. The line between domestic and international, whatever you want to call these things, not torture, is a thin one. In every war that we have used torture, the Philippines, when we use that in insurgency, those guys, they come home. What kind of jobs do they get? They get jobs as policemen, prison guards, and your private security officials. And behind them follows torture, or not torture, call it what you will. Chicago is paying $20 million thanks to Mr. Burge and his 50 detectives who brought all their lovely techniques back from Vietnam. Look, at the end of this war, whether these guys get their way or not, people are coming back. And they're going to be your cops, your neighborhood officials. They're going to be your private people. And yes, there is a difference between domestic and international, but this stuff travels.
Darius,
let
me
me
make
another
point
too.
That if this is important for us to do to save American lives, because we've got this superhuman enemy that we have never faced before, because this foe is different and they are so dedicated. If this is important for us to do at some level, then to the moral imperative question, why should we stop at all? Why not the rack? Why not perfidy? Why not treachery? Why not all kinds of things? Because if that's the moral thing to do in order to save lives, then by George, we ought to be doing it across the board and not stopping ourselves anywhere short. I think that the world has relied, and the United States has been far from perfect. Our history is replete with examples of where we have failed in big things and in little things. But the world has relied on us to stand for the rule of law and for human rights. And it's not a rule of law if you only apply it when it's convenient. And it's not a human right if it only applies to some people. We need to stand tall in this and not draw lines, because this enemy is the worst enemy we have ever faced.
Let me just argue that, first of all, what we are doing is within the rule of law, because a terrorist detainee is not covered by the Geneva Convention.
It's how you define the law.
And he is covered by the Convention Against Torture. There is no question. We are obligated to follow the Convention Against Torture. That's why it matters to make the distinctions that Darius refuses to. We are not arguing torture on this side. And Darius, you seem to think that the only possible set of questioning techniques are these random, it was rather arbitrary what got put into the Army Field Manual. You yourself know there has been, contrary to the claims on the other side, there has been no serious empirical work even on the Army Field Manual. Are you suggesting that those are the only possible questioning techniques that can ever be used, and that somehow they are handed down from on high as the absolute way of questioning? There may have been 12. If Mutt and Jeff had not originally been included in them, my guess is that if we were now
Mutt and Jeff are good
proposing
cop, bad
good
cop for
cop,
people
bad
who
cop,
don't know the...
you would call that torture as well, because that wouldn't be
No,
in the
actually,
Army Field
Heather,
Manual.
I think you're
So
getting
that's
your
why I think,
distinctions
again,
quite all
we
confused here.
We need to discuss whether stress is torture.
All right, Heather.
Listen, I'm the one who argued for public cooperation because Al-Qaeda is like a fish in a sea. You need to push it out of the water. It's a small group of people, and you need to have Iraqi civilians come in and turn people in. I have not been the one who argued for the interrogation manual. I have said that all the studies show that unless you have public cooperation on your side, the chances that you will be able to clear and solve a crime will fall to 10%, regardless of how you interrogate them, right? So it doesn't matter what you throw at this problem, right? And the more you do your not torture stuff, the more problematic it is. Let me get to another thing. Barbaric, different kind of enemy, sure. They're vengeful. And in the Middle East, they never forget. You know this. You know that in the Middle East, they never forget. You can get away with this. Do they have weapons of mass destruction? Well, as I understand, Mr. al-Libi, after he was beaten up by the Egyptians, actually said that Saddam Hussein trained al-Qaeda in weapons of biological and chemical destruction. The Pentagon yesterday produced this huge report that proved that this was entirely false, but it went into the president's speech in October in 2002 and it was part of the case that took us to war. And let me tell you, I don't know how many lives these not torture techniques have saved, but I can tell you how many lives it's taken. It's taken everybody who's died.
All right.